This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Andy Minter. The Card: A Story of Adventure in the Five Towns, by Arnold Bennett. Chapter 11. 1. Although Denry was extremely happy as a bridegroom, and capable of the most foolish symptoms of affection in private, he said to himself, and he said to Nelly, and she sturdily agreed with him, "We aren't going to be the ordinary silly honeymooners," by which of course he meant that they would behave so as to be taken for staid married persons. They failed thoroughly in this enterprise as far as London, where they spent a couple of nights. But on leaving Charing Cross they made a new and better start in the light of experience. Their destination, it need hardly be said, was Switzerland. After Mrs Capron Smith's remarks on the necessity of going to Switzerland in winter if one wished to respect oneself, there was really no alternative to Switzerland. Thus it was announced in the Signal, which had reported the wedding in 10 lines, owing to the excessive quietude of the wedding, that Mr and Mrs Councillor Machin were spending a month at Montpridoux sur Montreux, on the Lake of Geneva, and the announcement looked very well. At Dieppe they got a through carriage. There were several through carriages for Switzerland on the train. In walking through the corridors from one to another, Denry and Nellie had their first glimpse of the world which travels, and which runs off for a holiday whenever it feels in the mood. The idea of going for a holiday in any month but August seemed odd to both of them. Denry was very bold, and would insist on talking in a naturally loud voice. Nellie was timid and clinging. "What do you say?" Denry would roar at her when she half whispered something, and she had to repeat it so that all could hear. It was part of their plan to address each other curtly, brusquely, and to frown and to pretend to be slightly bored by each other. They were outclassed by the world which travels. Try as they might, even Denry was morally intimidated. He had managed his clothes fairly correctly. He was not ashamed of them, and Nellie's were by no means the worst in the compartments. Indeed, according to the standard of some of the more intimidating women, Nellie's costume erred in not being quite sufficiently negligent, sufficiently anyhow. And they had plenty, and 10 times plenty, of money, and the consciousness of it. Expense was not being spared on that honeymoon. And yet, well, all that can be said is that the company was imposing. The company, which was entirely English, seemed to be unaware that any one ever did anything else but travel luxuriously to places mentioned in second-year geographies. It astounded Nellie that there should be so many people in the world with nothing to do but spend, and they were constantly saying the strangest things with an air of perfect calm. "How much did you pay for the excess luggage?" an untidy young woman asked of an old man. "Oh, £13," answered the old man carelessly. And not long before, Nellie had scarcely escaped 10 days in the steerage of an Atlantic liner. After dinner in the restaurant car, no champagne because it was vulgar, but a good, sound, expensive wine, they felt more equal to the situation, more like part owners of the train. Nellie prudently went to bed ere the triumphant feeling wore off, but Denry stayed up smoking in the corridor. He stayed up very late, being proud and happy and too avid of new sensations to be able to think of sleep. It was a match which led to a conversation between himself and a thin, drawling, overbearing fellow with an eyeglass. Denry had hated this lordly creature all the way from Dieppe. In presenting him with a match he felt that he was somehow getting the better of him. For the match was precious in the nocturnal solitude of the vibrating corridor. The mere fact that two people are alone together and awake, divided from a sleeping or sleepy population only by a row of closed mysterious doors, will do much to break down social barriers. The excellence of Denry's cigar also helped. It atoned for the breadth of his accent. He said to himself, "I'll have a bit of a chat with this Johnny." And then he said aloud, "Not a bad train, this." "No," the eyeglass agreed languidly. "Pity they give you such a beastly dinner." And Denry agreed hastily that it was. Soon they were chatting of places, and somehow it came out of Denry that he was going to Montreux. The eyeglass professed its indifference to Montreux in winter, but said the resorts above Montreux were all right, such as Caux or Pridoux. And Denry said: "Well, of course, shouldn't think of stopping in Montreux. Going to try Pridoux." The eyeglass said it wasn't going as far as Switzerland yet. It meant to stop in the Jura. "Geneva's a pretty deadly place, ain't it?" said the eyeglass after a pause. "Yes," said Denry. "Been there since that new esplanade was finished?" "No," said Denry. "I saw nothing of it." "When were you there?" "Oh, a couple of years ago." "Ah, it wasn't started then. Comic thing. Of course they're awfully proud in Geneva of the view of Mont Blanc." "Yes," said Denry. "Ever noticed how queer women are about that view? They're no end keen on it at first, but after a day or two it gets on their nerves." "Yes," said Denry. "I've noticed that myself. My wife..." He stopped, because he didn't know what he was going to say. The eyeglass nodded understandingly. "All alike," it said. "Odd thing." When Denry introduced himself into the two berth compartment which he had managed to secure at the end of the carriage for himself and Nellie, the poor tired child was as wakeful as an owl. "Who have you been talking to?" she yawned. "The eyeglass Johnny." "Oh, really?" Nellie murmured, interested and impressed. "With him, have you? I could hear voices. What sort of man is he?" "He seems to be an ass," said Denry. "Fearfully haw haw. Couldn't stand him for long. I've made him believe we have been married for 2 years." II They stood on the balcony of the Hôtel Beau Site at Montpridoux. A little below, to the right, was the other hotel, the Métropole, with the red and white Swiss flag waving over its central tower. A little below that was the terminal station of the funicular railway from Montreux. The railway ran down the sheer of the mountain into the roofs of Montreux like a wire. On it two toy trains crawled towards each other, like flies climbing and descending a wall. Beyond the fringe of hotels that constituted Montreux was a strip of water, and beyond the water a range of hills, white at the top. "So these are the Alps!" Nellie exclaimed. She was disappointed. He also. But when Denry learnt from the guide book and by inquiry that the strip of lake was 7 miles across, and the highest notched peaks 10,000 feet above the sea and 25 miles off, Nellie gasped and was content. They liked the Hôtel Beau Site. It had been recommended to Denry by a man who knew what was what as the best hotel in Switzerland. "Don't you be misled by prices," the man had said. And Denry was not. He paid 16 francs a day for the two of them at the Beau Site, and was rather relieved than otherwise by the absence of finger bowls. Everything was very good, except sometimes the hot water. The hot water cans bore the legend "Hot Water," but these two words were occasionally the only evidence of heat in the water. On the other hand, the bedrooms could be made sultry by merely turning a handle, and the windows were double. Nellie was wondrously inventive. They breakfasted in bed, and she would save butter and honey from the breakfast to furnish forth afternoon tea, which was not included in the terms. She served the butter freshly with ice by the simple expedient of leaving it outside the window of a night, and Denry was struck by this housewifery. The other guests appeared to be of a comfortable, companionable class, with, as Denry said, no frills. They were amazed to learn that a chattering little woman of 35, who gossiped with everybody and soon invited Denry and Nellie to have tea in her room, was an authentic Russian countess, inscribed in the visitors' lists as Comtesse Ruhl, with maid, Moscow. Her room was the untidiest that Nellie had ever seen, and the tea a picnic. Still, it was thrilling to have had tea with a Russian countess. Plots, nihilism, secret police, marble palaces. Those visitors' lists were breathtaking. Pages and pages of them, scores of hotels, thousands of names, nearly all English, and all people who came to Switzerland in winter, having naught else to do. Denry and Nellie bathed in correctness as in a bath. The only persons in the